The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Coming up on the agenda.
My spending habits were trash at one point. You know, I had debt, horrible credit score, and I evolved. So everybody can do it as well.
Then,
on the watch of my mom's demographic and a baby boom demographic, we didn't have the hard conversation about what does it take to pay enough in taxes during your working years to cover the costs for retirement income and medical care you're going to later want to use.
that's ahead on the agenda. There are lots of helpful adages about how to manage your money. Pay yourself first, don't spend more than you earn, put away enough for a rainy day. You've heard them all before. But even better, say those in the know, make a personal budget and stick to it. Advisors say, I see heads nodding here already, advisors say it's amazing how many people don't do that. It's not as daunting a task as you may think, and here to help simplify it and maybe even inspire you to take the plunge, we're joined by Kingsley Chack. He is Senior Vice President, Deposits, Savings and Investments at Scotiabank. Stephanie Wolf, Certified Financial Coach and founder of Wolf Collective Wealth. And Shay Myers, licensed financial educator and creator of the online educational platform Finance for the Culture. Great to have you three with us here at the table here. I'm going to start with just some numbers here that I'm sure all of you know, which are somewhat terrifying, but let's do these anyway. This is the best and most recent data on the financial habits of Canadians. It comes from 2019, the Financial Capability Survey, which found about half of Canadians have a budget. 20% of those who do budget report using a digital tool such as a spreadsheet or an app. And Canadians who do budget are 10 percentage points more likely to make progress on their debt. All right, with that as our foundation for our discussion, who am I going to go to first here? Stephanie, why do so few people budget?
I think a lot of it actually comes down to the emotional framing of thinking about what a budget is. A lot of people think, oh my God, a budget means that I can't spend money. And it's sort of a reduction spend, right? And I want people to reframe that and think about it in a different way. It's a spending plan so that you can get control of your money. So instead of whittling away and thinking about how little do I actually have, flip that on its head and think about it as a spending plan.
Tell us about that 50% that don't budget. Why don't they make out a budget?
I think a lot of people don't know where they actually are. And so, or they're wrapped up in their past horrible spending habits, and they don't know how to move forward. I think a lot of people lack guidance as well. And so let's say someone is, for example, in a lot of debt or has horrible spending habits. They don't really know the first step to move forward, and so they just avoid it altogether.
What do you say?
I think it's the intimidation factor. Right?
Intimidation.
Intimidation. People think that I need a big spreadsheet, I need to track everything, it's going to be tough, it's challenging. But you know, there are a lot of tools right now that you do it every day, and it's actually simple. I think the first step is having a conversation, starting a budget, and getting started is really the first step.
Tell me more about that conversation, Kingsley, because, okay, you're talking to a client. The client doesn't budget. They don't know how to budget. How do you start that conversation with them to get them on the path?
Yeah, the first step is, what's your goal? What are you trying to achieve, and what do you want to do? Once that is defined, then really looking at your spending pattern, right? And so nowadays, at Scotiabank and a lot of other banks have personal tools in your mobile app that help you to look at your spending, and they automatically categorize it, so you don't need to. Every spend, you go to your phone and lock it down. You don't need to do that anymore. Every month and every day, you can look at how much you have spent, and making those simple and easy to follow. You know, we talk about only 50% budget. How many people actually stick with the budget and follow through? Probably a much lower amount.
Right. When you're talking finance for the culture and you want to get people on a budget, how do you start?
How do I start? So I get to know them. I get to know what their current spending habits are. And I also, just like, you said goal setting as well. Like, where are you and where do you want to go? So I do something called a financial analysis where I look at their cash flow. So what is coming in on a monthly basis and what is going out. And
those numbers should have some relationship to one another.
yes.
Yeah.
And also, if they have disposable income at the end of every month, where is that going, or how can we properly allocate that? And then if they don't, like if they're in the red, we need to look at their expenses, right? Like, are you overspending in some area? Or honestly, sometimes the cold, hard truth is that you need to make more money. But the financial analysis is going to reveal all of that.
Gotcha. Stephanie, how does the conversation start with you?
Well, for me, I think it comes back to the relationship. I think money is a very emotional topic, and we were sort of alluding to that just a couple of minutes ago. But I think starting with what's important to them first. I think defining, we talk about the goals, but I think it's understanding what your relationship is with money. And if somebody does have money behaviors that maybe don't sound very healthy.
Like what?
Maybe overspending, perhaps in areas where they shouldn't be. Identifying those triggers. What is driving the emotional feeling for you to want to overspend in certain areas?
You have that conversation.
I do.
So that's you're more psychologist than banker at that point, aren't you?
Before you even get into the money conversation, I think it's really important to define what your values are and what's important to you before you set those goals, because it becomes too black and white and it can be a little bit difficult to make that emotional change. It's about those tiny habits, right?
Okay, tiny habits. Shay, how do you tell somebody you don't have the income to be spending $8 a day on lattes, so stop it?
So the financial analysis will reveal that. It will literally say, based on your income, based on your expenses, this is how much you have at the end of every month, or this is how much you don't have. And I like balance. I want people to enjoy balance. So focus on your financial goals, but also enjoy life. But I made a TikTok about this the other day, honestly, and I said, look, sometimes you have to make a decision. If you can't afford to do both, you have to make a decision of what is a priority. And that's just what it is. I do bring a bit of tough love to, my clients, because I want them to see, like, a change has to be made. And sometimes the answers are literally, like you just said, black and white. And so if it is a situation where you can't afford to have Starbucks every single week, you probably already know that, but I'm just here to tell you it again, and then also provide you with the backup of the numbers that you can't do it. At least not right now. Right?
Well, okay, Kingsley, money is, how do I put this? Money is still, in many respects, one of those taboo subjects in society, right? We're not supposed to ask anybody how much money they make, and we're not supposed to ask people how much they paid for that house or what's your rent, or there's lots of stuff we don't talk about. Should we try to do something about that and make money less taboo a topic?
Yeah, I think, as Stephanie said, money is very emotional, right? It's very personal, but at the same time, it's also facts and numbers, right? And I think, starting with budget, the first step is really be honest to yourself and talk about this. And when you talk to an advisor, those conversations are private and you have your privacy protected. But it could be sometimes uncomfortable, but that's kind of the intimidating factor a little bit in terms of, it's not comfortable, I don't want to talk about it, and taking the first step to reach out to someone and having a conversation, or you even look at your expenses last month and just looking at it and see where you spend. I think those are one of really good first step, and people should feel more comfortable talking about it and talk to your friends about it. I have conversation with my friends and say, hey, how do you save money? What are you seeing? And those discussions.
You ask your friends how much money they make?
Not explicitly, but we do talk about right now. I think a lot of Canadians' mind is inflation, right? Groceries prices are going up, rent is going up, and it's tougher and tougher. We talk about that. We talk about how do you plan to save your money? Where do you invest money? How much of your percent of your income that you're putting on saving? How much you're spending? So in percentage term, you don't need to think about the absolute number. That makes the conversation easier.
And people know those numbers? They can talk about those numbers off the top of their head?
Sometimes. Right? And so, I have friends that will know, we make a plan and save 20% of our income, right? And so that goes, maybe I need to think about, is it 20%, 25%, what is right for me? And all those are very personal.
Shay, can you actually have that conversation with your friends, as in, how much money do you make? How much are you saving? How much are you spending? Can you ask those questions?
It's tricky.
Long
it's
pause
tricky.
there.
Yes, it's tricky because, you know, it's so interesting. When I got into this field, I knew some of that information already from my friends because we're friends and we talk about that and you know, we have those transparent conversations. But now that I'm an advisor, it's like they don't want to talk about money necessarily. Maybe they feel like I might know more than them or I might judge them, but
That's it, really, isn't it? It's judging.
it's the judge, and it's. I always remind people, like, I started off just like you. My spending habits were trash at one point. You know, I had debt, horrible credit score, and I evolved. So everybody can do it as well.
Tell us more. Tell us some of the stupid stuff you spent money on.
Oh my goodness, clothes, shoes, outside food. Uber Eats had a hold on me, and. Yeah, I would spend probably 90% of my paycheck on, well, I would spend 90% of my paycheck the day I got my paycheck. So it was bad.
Okay, you not only broke the habit, but you're now in a position to advise others on how to do it.
Yes.
So how did you do it?
I got an advisor. So I, you know, met someone who was educating people on how money worked, and I listened and I applied it, and I was able to achieve a lot in a very short period of time. And it was a mindset switch, though. So not only did I learn actually how money worked, but I had someone who actually cared about me and cared about my dreams and my goals outside of the financial spectrum, and who also made it relatable. So that's now what I focus on. I focus on helping people build a foundation, but talking about money fun and relatable. I use analogies. You know, I make comparisons to celebrity, you know, things that are going on in the celebrity world.
Go ahead, hit me with one.
And okay, well, are we ready to talk about life insurance? Because that's you know, something that people don't want to talk about. But we're seeing that certain celebrities are passing away with nothing, no life insurance, no wills, and their families are essentially left with financial burden. And so bringing those topics to everyday people, you know, and helping them understand those things. And also just like, I use humor to talk about money because I like to laugh, and I also retain more information when I'm enjoying myself. So that's how I make talking about money fun.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Can you have these kinds of conversations with your friends, as in how much do you make, how much are you saving, etc.?
With my friends, some. It depends on the relationship, I would say. Some of them I can, some of them I can't. And it's something that I wish wasn't as taboo. And that's something that, you know, personally as a financial counselor, that's something I'd love to break. But I think that's, you know, things that Shay has touched on. That's why people do work with a wealth coach or a wealth advisor, is because they want to be able to have somebody help guide them. And I wish that more people would do it, because sometimes you just need that accountability and that support outside that will help you move the needle just a little bit, get you on the right track.
There's an expression you just used, wealth coach. Is that what you call what you do?
Yes.
You're more a coach than an advisor.
I am more, yes, I am an accredited financial counselor, but a wealth coach, because my goal is to actually help people who have high income but low net worth achieve that high net worth as well. So really working, especially with women who are high earners and looking to get to that next level, but they're not really sure how to actually get started. So helping them establish that base, that foundation, identifying their goals, and how to start investing so that they can reach those goals.
Have the conversation. Let's have it right now. She's a high net worth person, but she's not sure what to do.
All right.
What do you tell her to do?
So, well, the first thing I would do is ask Shay, what does she want to do? Short, medium, and long-term goals. So I would say, let's just pick a medium-term goal. Is there something that you're working towards on a medium-term goal? And I don't know if she's going to answer it for me right now.
But is the idea, I want to be making X number of dollars by the time I'm X number of years old? Is that what you mean?
It's typically finding out the way that they're spending their cash flow, right? Cash flow in, cash flow out. I like to work off the 50-30-20 rule.
What does that refer
which
to?
is 50% of their income should be going towards fixed expenses. 20% should be going towards their fixed savings and investment goals, and then 30% towards their discretionary income. So I actually have something called an anti-budget calculator, because I think that 30% can sit off to the side, and as long as you've got that allocated, it's not necessary to have to check every single time that you're spending. Coming back to that mindset I was talking about at the beginning, it's about a spending plan. So if you've got that 50% locked in with your fixed expenses and your 20% with your future self, go and have fun. Go do whatever you want with that 30%. Yes, that's for living life, and that's how you can manage it.
What do you do, Kingsley, with, I mean, obviously there are going to be some people watching this or listening to this who are saying, that 50% of fixed costs for me is not really 50, it's more like 99.
Yeah.
And I have nothing left at the end. I can't save, I don't have discretionary income to have fun with. What do you say to them?
Yeah, I think it's honestly reviewing all the expenses that you have and really understanding whether that 90% is all fixed, right? I would argue that you probably, when you take a good look, not all 90% is a fixed income. So one is looking at it and see how much you can cut off. The other one is, what are other ways to save, right? Is there things that you can do that actually get your dollar to go further every time, right? Like there's, if you are on top of your finances, you not racking up credit card, you're paying off your credit card every month. Using a credit card can get you a lot of loyalty points, and that helps you and earn a few bucks here and there as you're spending to make your money go further, right? So some of those will be helpful, and how do we get those? But those are marginal gains. The most important part is looking at what you can cut, and it might be an uncomfortable conversation, but a needed conversation to get a hold of your finances.
But I'm gathering, Shay, that you're not necessarily dealing with, you're dealing with people with money, right? You're not dealing with people who are in a difficult spot and really don't have any savings at the end of the month. Is that fair to say? Both.
I do deal with a lot of people who, they are broke, for lack of better terms, and broke but have room to improve. So it could be mismanaging their money. But I do have situations where some people are just not making enough income. And that could be whether they are just comfortable in their job, or they don't know how to take the next step, or maybe they're considering starting a business and they just haven't taken that step yet. But yeah, I definitely deal with people who have a lot of debt, who aren't making enough to deal with those debts. And now it's a situation of, okay, you either need to make more income, or if you can't cut expenses, how do we deal with this debt? Whether that's consolidation, consumer proposal, and there is a lot of pushback on those things because there's an impact on your credit. And I always tell people, look, doing this is going to allow you to pay off the debt faster. And honestly, improving your credit is not that hard. Sometimes you have to make a sacrifice, and I personally would make the sacrifice of a good credit score to get rid of debt faster. So.
I want to know, Stephanie, how you have that conversation with somebody that goes like this. Given how much you're spending, and given what's in your 30%, you really like to go out and have a good time from time to time. You need to get a better job. You need to go out and make more money. How do you tell people that?
Usually we start with having the conversation about where they're at in their career and what their future goals are for their career. Sometimes it does come down to negotiating a higher income, finding a new job, because it is a honest conversation that does come up, which is you might have to be earning more, or you might have to go back to school. There's going to be other factors if you're going to invest in yourself first before you start to invest in other areas of your life. Usually investing in yourself to gain that higher income is sometimes a solution as well.
I presume you give different advice to somebody who's 27 as opposed to somebody who's 58. How does the advice differ?
Usually somebody who's in the later years of their life, they're looking already at decumulation. How are they going to start drawing on their savings and investments to supplement their retirement? And those who are in their early 20s or mid 20s have the entire years ahead of them to start building that wealth. So they're in a very good situation. I always say, it's just start today. Just start today, no matter what, because time is on your side when it comes to investing.
That's what I want to know. How do you convince a 27-year-old that someday, 50 years from now, you're going to want to retire, maybe 40. You're going to want to
show them the numbers.
You're going to want to retire.
You just show them the numbers. Show them the numbers and how much compound interest can really make a difference.
It's a beautiful thing, isn't it?
I love it. I love it.
And you really can convince a 27-year-old to put a little bit aside and save every month?
Usually the woman that I'm working with, yes, they see the potential in the future, and they're typically high achievers, and they're looking for that next level. Yeah.
Kingsley, inflation, thankfully, is starting to get down a little bit, but it's certainly the highest it's been in 40 years. How do you advise people to navigate around the inflationary times in which we live?
Yeah, it's a challenging environment. We're seeing headline news on groceries, rents all going up. I think in a high interest rate environment, the number one thing is reduce your debt, right? Because you're being charged interest on those debts, so every dollar go into reducing that debt is important. I think second of all is investing in your future, like Stephanie said, right? Like if you are with a employer and they do co-investing in terms of a dollar that you put in, they put in another dollar to invest in your future, maximize that, and that's going to help you to build the fund in a few later in life. And lastly, is also how do you set up a rainy day fund, right? On average, 3 to 6 months of your income, and set it aside in case something happened. You have some financial buffer to help you to get through that, right? Like, so those are the three things.
Okay, I saw some numbers not too long ago that said something like 80% of Canadians don't have a rainy day fund. That if they get hit with a disaster, 80% of people don't have 3 to 6 months income sitting in a bank account ready to help out. How do they start?
Yeah, taking the small step to start looking at your plan and start putting savings in there. It could be a bank the rest product. For example, you spend $5.25. The remaining 75 cents will go into your saving accounts, right? So every little one counts. It's about habit and behaviors. How do you automate that and start going by little? It might seem a big challenge to get to 1 month buffer. You need to start somewhere. It may take you a couple months to get to 1 month and slowly build that up. It's about taking the first step to start.
Stephanie, we're in our last minute here. Can people really save during these kinds of inflationary times?
I think so, absolutely. It comes down to establishing those healthy financial habits, understanding your relationship with money, and making the conscious choice to do better. So, absolutely.
That's Stephanie Wolf. She is with Wolf Collective Wealth. She's a certified financial coach. We thank her for being here today, along with Kingsley Chack, Senior VP, Deposit Savings and Investments at Scotiabank, and Shay Myers. Finance for the culture is what she's all about. My thanks to you three for coming into TVO tonight.
Thank you, Steve.
If you want to get people of a certain age hot under the collar, just say, baby boomers didn't pay their fair share of taxes. Paul Kershaw recently did that, and he got an earful. But he stands firmly by his view, having put a good deal of work into comparing the circumstances of varying generations. Paul Kershaw is founder of Generation Squeeze, which calls itself a, quote, think and change tank. Not just a think tank, a think and change tank. He's a professor of public policy at the University of British Columbia, co-hosts the podcast Hard Truths, and he joins us now here in the studio. Great to see you again.
Thanks so much for having me back.
Not at all. Let's start with something that, I think you might have written this in the Globe and Mail. Here we go. Sheldon, put this up if you would. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland emphasized the need for fiscal restraint in her recent budget, but that's not what she delivered in a budget which includes $132 billion in deficit spending over the next 5 years. This adds about $6,100 in government debt for every Canadian under age 45, most of which pays for spending used by the aging population. Okay, explain that last part to us, the notion that a disproportionate share of the debts being currently incurred are going to be paid by younger people.
Yeah, and toward an aging population. I think that was the key point I was making in that part of the Globe and Mail article. So if we look in the fine print of the federal budget, which is what I make my business doing as a policy professor, you can see that old age security over the next 5 years is going to grow by a whopping $86 billion of new spending. Spending on the Canada Health Transfer is going to go up by about $50 billion. Around half of that is going to be used by the 19% of the population over 65. When you put those two things together, it comes to about $110 billion. And that means that of the $132 billion in deficit spending. We've probably lost everyone with my math exercise right now.
I'm impressed that you're keeping all these numbers very cogent, so good for you.
Of that $132 billion in deficit spending over the next 5 years, 84% of it, the vast, vast majority of it, will go to spending used by people that I love, like my mom, and all of the aging family members in our lives. The spending on that demographic in and of itself isn't the problem. The public finance that is giving rise to routine deficits, having a conversation about fiscal restraint, but not understanding what's making that impossible, that is creating a big intergenerational tension.
Doesn't your mother need that money?
Absolutely. My mom needs and deserves to have a financially secure, healthy retirement.
So what's the problem?
The problem is that on the watch of my mom's demographic and a baby boom demographic, we didn't have the hard conversation about what does it take to pay enough in taxes during your working years to cover the costs for retirement income and medical care you're going to later want to use. And here's how I know. So when baby boomers came of age in the mid-1970s, there were about 7 working age adults for every retiree. Today, there's 3.3. Now, that wouldn't have been a problem if we designed our tax system to say, oh, during your working lives, we're going to collect from you all the revenue you're going to need to prepay for what you'll later use. But that's not how Canada's policy works, with the exception of one very important policy, the Canada Pension Plan. In the mid-1990s, our governments recognized, this baby boomer bulge that we call, it's a real thing. It's going to pose some challenges. Prior to the 90s, we paid for our pensions and our medical care just as the country incurred costs. So when there was relatively few retirees relative to workers, you could keep taxes low because lots of workers, not a lot of people using retirement income and medical care when we're most fragile later in our lives. But in the 90s, people had, that's going to bankrupt the Canada Public Pension Plan. And they were right. So they actually increased in the mid-90s by 65% what workers had to pay for benefits they would later draw down. But we didn't. We didn't do that for medical care, and we didn't do that for old age security.
So we're still using a lot of services in the boomer generation and sending the bill to our kids.
That's exactly right. These are important policies, important services to use. An older demographic deserves them, but we haven't had the conversation with them saying, you didn't prepay enough for what you're now wanting to use. And unless we make some adaptations asking, especially an affluent component of the older demographic, to start contributing more, there is absolutely no way we are not going to leave unpaid bills to your kids and grandchildren.
Is that the same thing as saying boomers are not living within their means?
Well, that headline came about because when I started talking about the idea that boomers haven't paid enough taxes for what they want to use, I did get some vitriolic emails.
You don't say.
I did, and it started off with a bit of swearing. But when we move beyond the swearing, the line that the person said is, I've never taken a government handout. I live within my means. And I'm like, well, let me just show you what's happened on your watch in terms of government debt. And government debt, so boomers came of age in the mid-1970s as young adults when for every person under 45, there was about 10 grand in government debt. If you flash forward to today, there's over 50 grand. Now, there's some reasons why we should massage those numbers, but it is safe to say that on the watch of baby boomers, government debt has tripled at the per capita level when compared to the past. And that is got to be a clear sign that, maybe we organize politics around earning our vote by saying, we're going to offer you more, but not having the hard conversation about how are we going to pay for that?
Haven't we always done that? The generation of today always uses services and sends the bill to the next generation down. Isn't that true?
That is true, but that's why the boomer bulge matters so much. The demographics here are the big challenge. The fact that in the mid-1970s, there were 7 working age adults for every retiree, and now there's barely 3. This is a really big demographic challenge because we didn't do what we did later in the 90s, where we said, oh, we're going to have a larger demographic of older people needing to draw services. And so we have to make sure they pay enough for what they're going to want to use. We never said that. And so if we'd had the same number of workers relative to retirees every decade, there'd be no problem whatsoever. But we call them a baby boom for a reason. It's not as if we're surprised by the fact that this large group of people is working its way through their life cycle. And so we didn't prepare. And I'm not out here to be mean about that. I'm certainly not trying to shame an older demographic. I'm wanting to invite my mom and all the moms and dads and grandparents out there to say, you want things to be better for your kids and grandchildren. That's not the legacy that's actually being left in a whole range of ways, whether it's public finance or housing or climate change, but there's still time.
Let's pick up on housing. Sheldon, top of page 2. Can you bring up this chart, please? This is net wealth in housing in Canada. And for those who are listening on podcast, we'll just describe, we're looking at a chart here. It's got 4 bars. And if you go back to 1977, the amount of wealth that those under 45 and those over 55 had in their homes, about the same, essentially the same. If you flash forward, as Paul likes to say, to 2019, you find a huge gap. Those over 55 now have 58% of their income in their principal residence, whereas those under 45 make up only 21% of it. It is a huge gap.
Yeah, can I just refine that a little bit?
Please.
So, in other words, of all the housing wealth that is out there today, about 60% of it is owned by those 55 and older. It used to be about 40%. And back in the day, you had a younger demographic having about 1/3 of the housing wealth. Now they have barely 20%.
How did that happen?
Exactly. So our earlier conversation was about public finance. How are governments investing between young and old alike? And I can share more details about that as we go along. But you might think it's totally fine to ask a younger demographic to contribute more now to today's aging population if that aging population was really financially vulnerable and the young demographic was doing fabulously well.
But that's not the case.
It is exactly the opposite. And your bar graphs help to show that. And I think one of the simplest ways to show that the economy doesn't reward hard work for today's young people like it used to is to think about home prices, which we all know, especially in Ontario, has done this. Earnings, done this. What does that mean? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, if you were a homeowner, if you were a nurse or a waitress or a bus driver back in the late 70s or early 80s and you bought a home in Toronto or Hamilton, as a regular person could do, the fact that home prices have done this is fabulous. I'm in this. I've been a homeowner in Metro Vancouver for the last 20 years. I gained $1 million in just the last 4 years alone. There are many people in Toronto and Hamilton and in London and so on who can make that same observation about gaining housing wealth. So that's increased affluence for an older demographic, pushed many sort of middle-class people into the more affluent categories, but their kids, the exact opposite happened. Their kids might have better jobs, more education, but their jobs can't earn incomes that keep pace. And so whereas it used to take 5 years of full-time work to save a 20% down payment on an average priced home across the country, in this province, even in Toronto, it now takes 17 years across the country. 22 is the average in Ontario. And a whopping, soul-destroying 27 years in the Greater Toronto Area.
So if you're in, it's great. If you're not in, forget it.
It is, but it's not just forget it. Just think about what that means in terms of your sense of almost self-esteem. Like, to some degree, managing to secure housing, whether as an owner or as a renter, is something that one sort of says, like, yeah, an adult should be able to do that. And right now, our economy is making it so challenging for generations of young adults and newcomers of any age to actually make a go of it.
Every generation, though, thinks it's hard done by. Do you think boomers understand that if you look at it objectively, they're not so hard done by as a group?
Yeah, I think that that's one of the challenges of the generation squeeze work. When we started, we were more oriented around trying to bust myths for younger people. You're not struggling because you drink too many lattes or eat too much avocado toast or you have that cell phone. We were showing that the economy simply isn't rewarding hard work like it used to. I think the national debate and the Ontario debate is actually more willing to acknowledge that. What we're less likely to acknowledge is actually what's harming hard work paying off for younger people has benefited an older demographic. So that's why the articles I've been writing more recently for Generation Squeeze and in the Globe and Mail are trying to probe a little to my mom's demographic, to the retiring baby boomers. I know it's a moment of fragility, especially biologically. People are getting older, and that it's a biological reality that we're going to experience more vulnerability. But I think for too long we thought the biological fragility goes hand in hand with an economic fragility. But the data are clear. Those over 65 have the lowest rates of poverty of any age group in the country, and they have by far the most wealth and more wealth than previous groups of retirees. And so that is what I need in today's older demographic to heed the tagline of the Scotiabank: you're richer than you think.
So what do you want to do about this?
Well, there are some policy changes that we desperately need.
For example?
But before I can get to the policy changes, so there are policy changes. We are going to need to say to an older demographic, those of you who are affluent, how can you contribute more to the cost of your generation's medical care and old age security?
Define affluence.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. That's what I was going to actually say. But what we need to do before that is sort of have a cultural conversation about who is affluent. So let me start there, because I think that's the more provocative piece. We've done some polling recently where we were trying to probe Canadians' understanding of who's economically at risk, who's affluent. And we started with a scenario of, imagine a widow with an income of just $25,000, has her barely over the guaranteed income supplement living, so really close to low income. Rich or poor? Oh, that sounds poor. She lives in a home that she owns outright, and it's worth $1 million. People are not so sure now. Imagine the home's $2 million, which is not uncommon in the Toronto area or Hamilton area. And oh no, that person's rich. Then we swap it around and say, imagine a young lawyer making $200,000. It puts them in the top few percent of income earners in this country. Oh, definitely affluent. They're renting, and suddenly, oh no, that person is less affluent than the widow with 25 grand who owns outright a home worth $2 million. I think we need to be recognizing that An older demographic might not view itself as Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, but the relative affluence and security that comes with secure housing is something that a younger demographic is feeling really crowded out of, and they're being jeopardized by it.
How do we make policy if we can't agree on what constitutes affluence?
Well, that's why shows like yours are so important. So I guess we need to fund the TVO and get you broadcasting more and more from coast to coast so we can have these more in-depth conversations.
That is not why we had you come on
But
here, but
I-
you know,
I
but
think
I don't
it's-
mind you saying it.
It's
There you go.
worthwhile.
But I actually didn't mean it to be a facetious question. If we can't agree on, if you're trying to shake money out of a tree and you want to get it from affluent people, and we can't agree on what constitutes affluence, how do we do it?
Yeah. You know, I pride myself as a professor who's not only good with the data, but also someone who's devoted a lot of time to comms, and I wish that, or communications, I should say. I think this is a challenge. I think it's going to involve some important storytelling and observations, and I tend not to focus a lot on homelessness, but let me bring a story from British Columbia. Your listeners might have seen recently that we had police officers and garbage trucks go down one of our streets in the poorest neighborhood in the country. And we were removing the tents that people were using to sleep on the sidewalks, because this is the part of the population that is most harmed by housing unaffordability and literally do not have a actual structure to sleep in under other than a tent at night. And I find myself at this stage struggling to figure out, why is this happening when in that very same city we have created more housing wealth there than perhaps anywhere else on the planet. And you could say much the same thing about the GTA and the level of homelessness that you experience here in Ontario in our city center. And so I think to some degree, there's going to, you might be a left of center person and say, I want to protect those who are vulnerable and I'm going to care for them. You might be those who are like, I don't buy that argument. And it's like, I want to be more self-serving. Like, if we lock out an entire generation of younger people who then are out, you lock out the rich lawyer from home ownership and they're competing for the rental that the middle class would have used in the past. The middle class go and find the rental that the blue collar worker would have had in the past. The blue collar now goes use the social housing, and the social housing isn't available for those on the street. Like, it trickles down in an incredibly harmful way, or cascades, I should say, not trickles. But that can create a great deal of strife. You know, I know people right now on the Toronto subway are feeling unsafe because of increased levels of violence. You can see that increased level of violence and unpredictability in a range of places. That is because our economy is not rewarding hard work for a younger demographic, newcomers of any age. And so when we have less economic security, you are going to get more crime, more ill health, more friction between groups. And let me take it back to where we started. I just said that our current system of old age security and medical care depends on the largesse, the kindness, the generosity of a younger demographic to pay more in taxes for their aging parents and loved ones than those aging parents and loved ones had to do, and take on larger deficits at the same time. If we're going to ask that of a younger demographic, it's likely only to be sustained if that older demographic says, I understand on my watch, maybe the legacy isn't entirely what I meant to leave.
Can I tell you a political reality, though, which I don't have to tell you because you know it already?
But tell me so that we can lament it.
Let's have it out anyway. Older people vote, younger people don't. Look at politicians respond to political pressure. Older people vote, younger people don't. What are you going to do about that?
Crawl under your table and cry?
I don't think that's going to help
not an
matters.
option. Okay, so no, there's two ways. So if you go to the Gen Squeeze website, gensqueeze.ca, you'll see one of the things we're interested in is rejuvenating democracy. And so as we tell hard truths to an older demographic, we also tell hard truths to a younger demographic. Politics responds to those who organize and show up. We are less likely to use our organizing to show up at the ballot box. It is no surprise that politics is then slow to acknowledge these intergenerational tensions. I would say Gen Squeeze could be judged a failure, to be honest, over the last decade at not lighting enough of a fire under a younger demographic to get us more mobilized and using our voter power. So to address that potential failure, I do find myself more and more reaching out to an older demographic, especially grandmothers.
Because they care about their grandkids.
And they vote. And so I think right now, there's many an older person who's like, wow, I find myself worried that my kids are not able to provide, the housing security for my grandchildren that I was hoping. I kind of wish they would actually live closer to me than they are, let alone like having access to any kind of rental or with a yard, et cetera. And so I think there's a moment where within families, we can ask our grandparents to start saying, this isn't quite, something is changing, and use that challenge around the family table at Thanksgiving or whatever our next intergenerational family moment will be, to then say, and what does that mean for our politics? Because we've socialized an older demographic to say, I'm going to vote for parties based on what more they're going to do for my medical care and my retirement income. We need to socialize those grandparents to say, that matters, but not at the expense of the childcare and education and post-secondary and supports for employment insurance that my kids and grandchildren are going to need as well.
Can that be done?
Yeah, because this is not your typical class analysis. I'm not here as Tommy Douglas saying a story about all the mice who are haplessly churning the cream that a bunch of fat, rich, black cats take and skim off for themselves. That's sort of, cats don't like mice. They eat mice. There's a tension there that's sort of innate. But generations love one another. So I get to start, and I know this is going to sound hopelessly naive in some way. I get to start from a place of love. That love exists around the family table. How can we bring that to the world of politics? Now, I have some younger people like, Paul, love, set that aside, take the gloves off, and start saying to boomers, you are leaving problems. And I think that we're trying to find the right balance. You're referring to the article in the Globe and Mail where, it took the gloves off a little more to attract that attention. But at the end of the day, there's a love between generations that I think might be the only factor that can really help us disrupt our systems and set us on a better path. Because generational unfairness is an underlying disease. We don't talk about the underlying disease. More often we talk about the symptoms, whether it's climate change, or housing wealth inequality and unaffordability, or the large deficits in public finance and underinvestment in a younger demographic. Those are all symptoms of this generational unfairness as the underlying disease. We need to turn our attention to that, because if we vaccinate that underlying disease, we can preserve what Canadians hold to be sacred: a healthy childhood, an affordable home, a healthy home, and a healthy planet.
My experience in politics is that it does not respond all that well to love, but it really does to fear and hate. And maybe what you need is a good old-fashioned generation war to make the kind of progress that you want to make. I'm not advocating it, but I say, I've noticed over the years that tends to be what politics responds to. What do you think?
I hope not, because I think that if that's the necessary step by which to achieve a reorganizing of our policy systems, then it will do a decent amount of damage that I would love to avoid. But I think that we are on track. We are on course for that intergenerational strife. If we don't heed the call right now that we have generational unfairness as an underlying disease, and it will ultimately, I think, do the following. A younger demographic is already suffering the ill effects. They're fearful about whether or not the planet will be sustainable. They are locked out of home ownership and pay much higher rent as their consolation prize. They're treated unfairly in a way that we don't often acknowledge enough in public finance. So they're already reaping the harms. But if the generational pact breaks down, then suddenly those harms start getting extended to the older family members in our lives who we love. And one of the things that I find most interesting about leading in Generation Squeeze is there is a growing discontent amongst the younger demographic, but they will all start with, I want to protect my parents and grandparents. And so I think now is the time to say to parents and grandparents, you've spent your decades thinking that you're protecting your kids and grandchildren, and it must really, can I say this, piss you off to have a prof come and an organization like Gen Squeeze come and say, it didn't work out as well as you'd like. But don't see that as our pitting generations against one another or are trying to shame you. Instead, look at it as there's a problem that we together can solve.
Time to take one for the team.
Time to acknowledge that you value paying for what you use. And all we're asking right now is to pay for what you're using. Younger demographic can figure out to deal with the other challenges they're facing.
Paul, you always give us so much to think about when you visit our program, which is why we like to have you on. That is Paul Kershaw, the Associate Professor at the University of British Columbia and founder of Generation Squeeze. Not just a think tank, but a think and change tank, promoting well-being for all generations. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
As interest rates cranked up last year with 7 hikes by the Bank of Canada in 2022 alone, it could be hard to figure out whether that or inflation was worse for your bottom line. Together, they meant rejigging or totally rewriting the household budget for many people. Certified financial planner Shannon Lee Simmons has seen it all as founder of the New School of Finance. Her new book is called No Regret Decisions, Making Good Choices During Difficult Times, and she joins us now with some advice. Great to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, nice to have you back here. There are many economists, of course, warning that we're about to have a recession any day now.
Yes.
Who knows? But based on what you hear and talk to your clients about, how worried are they?
Very. The proverbial phone is ringing off the hook, if you will, aka an exploding inbox. I'm getting a lot of emails at 3 in the morning too. And that is, I say that, it's telling, right? People are up in the middle of the night worrying about this. I'd say that the worry is twofold. So one, what's happening today and how am I going to do this? And then the anxiety about what's coming down the pipeline and the uncertainty around that. And we hear the R word, right? We hear recession.
You don't even want to say it.
Right, I know, jinx it. We hear the word, and of course, it's impossible not to say, well, what happens if that happens to me, to my job or my partner's job? Like, what do we do then? And so I'm really feeling the uncertainty of that.
Let me just push a bit on that. You're really getting emails at 3 in the morning from people?
Yeah. I'm not kidding. Like, and I use that as a barometer for how people are feeling about stuff. So I'll open my computer in the morning and I can see the timestamp, and there's questions like, I just had this thought, or even sometimes some more vulnerable than that, right? My mind is racing, I can't sleep, LOL, it's 3 a.m., you can tell, like this kind of thing. And the questions, if I was kind of doing anecdotals, test of what that question is, it's often about, things are hard right now, and we don't even have it hard. So what happens if the worst happens, which is a loss of a job, from a recession or something like that? So the anxiety about what happens if I lose a job is so real right now for people, and it's keeping them up at night, in my anecdotal experience anyways.
Now, I know you don't have a PhD in economics, but that doesn't stop you from giving advice to people. But the only reason I put that on the record is that do you have you've been at this long enough to know that you have a spidey sense about when recessions are coming. Do you sense one is coming?
I don't know that we'll get the technical, recession maybe that you, by definition, would have.
2 consecutive quarters of negative growth.
Correct. That's right. I have seen the swaths of layoffs. I mean, those people are in my office, and they've been coming since the start of those tech layoffs last year. And so what my spidey senses are saying are that people are talking to me saying, even at my job, we're on a hiring freeze. We're on a wage freeze, where all the perks have been cut back. So there's no more this, there's no more this. So what that is telling me anecdotally on the ground is that, okay, well, companies in the higher up level are preparing. They're not sure what to expect either, but everyone's kind of looking at the situation saying, do we need to take action? Do we not need to take action?
You know what makes it confusing, though, for me is that the deficit for the province of Ontario came in this past fiscal year, half as big as they thought it was going to be. Like, those are positive signs.
They are.
And yet you hear people constantly saying, I'm worried about a recession coming. Why?
I think sometimes the talking about it, honestly, there's like a self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit that can happen sometimes. And I think we're human beings. We can't help but internalize things. This might happen to me. This might happen to my household, my kids. What does that mean for me? It's the fear, it's anxiety. So, you can hear a stat like the deficit wasn't big, but that doesn't mean that my boss didn't say we're on a hiring freeze yesterday.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that I'm not scared because my grocery bill has gone up 3 times in the last, from what I usually would buy. And so that sounds like positive news that doesn't translate onto the kitchen table discussion. And I think that's the difference.
Okay, we mentioned in the intro the Bank of Canada has put up interest rates a lot over the last year in order to try to fight inflation. Right here, tugging at your So when you're giving advice to people, you're obviously giving them different advice in a world where interest rates are next to nothing versus where they are today. How does the advice differ?
Wildly. My colleagues and I laugh about things we used to say. We're like, oh, that was a knee slapper back then. So I think that the big thing that where this is really hitting home is anyone who's a first-time home buyer, this conversation is completely different now, right? Things that might have been attainable 4 years ago, 3 years ago, a year ago, may not be now, given where interest rates are at. So I think that's a huge one. So the advice around affordability.
Can I just jump in there?
Please.
Are you as blunt as saying to people, don't buy a house now?
I have always been blunt when things put people at risk. So yes, I found I ran into that situation less in previous times. So the frequency, and this may not even be for first-time home buyers. I'm also feeling this with people who are home buyers, but they were wanting to maybe renovate, or maybe they wanted to, this is a very privileged thing I'm about to say, but like they wanted to use the equity in their home to buy a second property or buy a recreational property. Like those dreams are on hold. Those things are paused.
Don't do that now.
It is, well, or do it, and here's all the other things you have to cut out of your life to make room for that. So is it worth it to you? And a lot of the conversations I'm having right now are that coaching side of things that I do, which is, okay, you can do this. The math is the math. I mean, if money was that easy, we'd all just be saving perfectly every month, wouldn't we? But it's like, are you willing to give up X, Y, Z? Including sometimes now the conversation is like including your RRSP contributions and like your retirement savings. Like that's what's at stake right now. We're not talking about like trimming the fat in your budget. Like, oh, maybe I can't get that delivery food come in. We're talking about like, are you willing to like not save for retirement to do that goal? And so the stakes feel higher. I think that's what the interest rates and the inflation have done, is it's raised the stakes of everyday conversations and decision making. So it's a real shift in the advice that we were saying before. And the big nerdy joke that we also make is like, if I had $1 for every time someone said like, do I pay the mortgage or put it in the RSP? I would be a very, very wealthy woman, and I wouldn't have a mortgage. But I think that shifted too. So before, when your mortgage is like 1.75 and your investments are, and you have a high enough income to make an RSP contribution worth it for the refund and the taxes, and the trajectory of your investments looks good at like 6%, it's really hard to make the argument to take the money and put it on the mortgage. And that has switched. So now with people renewing at higher rates coming down the pipeline, and volatility in the market that terrifies them at 3 a.m, maybe there's an emotional benefit as well as a financial benefit to like putting things on the mortgage.
Are you ever as blunt to say to any of your clients, you need to sell your house?
I have said that, but I would never say you have to, because it's not my decision fundamentally. But again, a lot of what I do is map out what life looks like if you don't make this hard decision. And that alone, seeing the outcome of it, is sometimes scary enough for someone to say, I think we have to do this. And then I'll say, I see why you made that decision, and I agree, because this trajectory is scary, and it's scarier maybe than staying in the house and waiting out whatever's happening. So a great example of that is like, somebody loses their job that's they're in their 50s, they still have a sizable mortgage, they don't really have a lot at save for retirement, they lose their job, it was a very high paying job and they cannot replace that income. They get another job, but maybe they went from a very high income, like 150,000, and now they can only get in at like, half of that. And so the whole trajectory is different, and the mortgage is still big, and now it's expensive.
Your job is to get them to see the real picture.
That's right.
Well, as you do that coaching, it sounds like one of the things that you are a real stickler for is reducing the amount of fear and uncertainty as to the extent that you can with your clients. A less afraid client is a better client for you.
Absolutely. I don't know that I've ever been asked that, but yes, it's true, because I think that what's so scary about money is the uncertainty. I think that's what makes it scary.
You must have people who look, I know you want everybody to save. Everybody wants people to be able to, pay yourself first, right? Isn't that what the wealthy barber said? Pay yourself first. You must have clients who've said, look, at SLS, I have looked through my ledgers 12 hours a day. I can't save right now. What do you say to them?
I say, okay, that's the facts. So maybe we're just gritting and bearing through this time in our life right now. It depends on the severity of that, right? So someone who says, I can't save right now, but maybe once inflation, I wouldn't knock on wood there, comes down.
Well, it's coming down.
Yeah, it is coming down, and in a sizable way, and the cost of food goes down. And then maybe when you renew in a few years, that would come down to as these things, as the pressure cooker kind of chills out a little bit, we can open up again. So are we looking at a life of not being able to save, or are we looking at 20 months of not being able to save?
Big difference.
Huge, massive difference. And so what I'll often do at that point is say, okay, if it's just a short time period here, let's map out what the opportunity cost is for you. So we'll map it out, and then I'll show them this amount of money that you would have put into your RSP or whatever is not going to make or break your retirement security. You are not in a situation of a have and have not because you took a pump the brakes for this short period of time versus someone who's about to make a decision to buy a house they can't afford at all and not be able to find the money indefinitely to save for retirement. And that's the big difference, is like short term or long term. Are we in a crisis, or is this a lifestyle? And that'll dictate, you know, how scared they are and how scared I am.
Gotcha. Last minute and a half here. Let's figure out what advice you're giving people as it relates to the stock market. Usually when there's a recession, the market crashes,
right,
or at least, you know, loses a lot of points. So what kind of advice are you giving on that front?
I think it would be the same as I always have, but I think I'm very careful on how I would phrase it in these, and really making sure people understand it. So again, when things are in a bull market, like, oh my God, the amount during the pandemic when things were just kicking off, I think that when I used to say to people, okay, make sure that these are long-term assets, okay, not short-term. We don't want to be putting your down payment fund into anything that you need in the next year and a half. I would get some eye rolls, right? Because when things are popping up, everyone has a really high risk tolerance in a bull market. And I would often say to people, you know, you don't really know your risk tolerance until you face a bear market. But if this is a first-time investor or someone who's only really had positive returns over the last decade, it's hard to make that claim, right? People would eye roll for real. So it's the same advice always, but now I think people are listening, like really being sure that you are not investing anything for the short run in the stock market, nor should it have ever been. And then also, if it is a long-term asset for retirement, then like keep calm and carry on. So this is a bump in the road. It's a completely normal part of investing. And often I'll show, you know, historical facts just to make people feel calm, that it's not that they're just throwing their money into lighting it on fire, you know? So even if, like, I look at all the people in 2007 who maybe you invested your whole life savings and then boom. But now, what happens if you didn't sell it at the bottom? Where are they now? And so that's very comforting. So it really comes down to low fee, well-balanced, diversified portfolio for the long run, and then don't put your short run stuff in there. That's where it gets scary.
These and other good stories and more good advice in No Regret Decisions. There we go, making good choices during difficult times in which we are living right now, potentially. Thanks, Shannon Lee Sims. Always good to have you here.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Belafonte hosted a week of The Tonight Show? How did I not know this?
That's right.